Here is the fully rewritten script in simple, clear English for a fifth grade student. Same length, same sequence, same tone, every detail preserved. So Canada just gave Donald Trump 48 hours. 48 hours to stop all tariffs between the two countries, publicly take back the 5 demands that started the trade war, and agree to come back to the talks with no conditions attached. If the deadline passes without Trump doing any of this, Canada will turn on a $935 billion payback trade plan, the biggest and most complete economic counterstrike ever put together by any country against the United States. The clock started this morning. It is ticking right now. Think about what you just heard. Canada, the country that 8 months ago was the target of American trade pressure, the country that was supposed to give in to 5 demands and accept that America had control over its economy, its trade rules, its money policy, and its foreign dealings, just gave the President of the United States a 48-hour deadline. Not a request, not a suggestion, not a polite note saying it was worried, a warning with a $935 billion consequence attached. The balance of power in this trade war just flipped completely, and Warren Buffett's response was immediate. What he said about the difference between warnings you can ignore and warnings you cannot, and why Canada's warning clearly falls into the second group, is something every decision maker in Washington needs to hear before the clock runs out. Because Buffett is not watching this as a bystander. He is watching it as a man who has already moved billions of dollars, betting that Washington will not meet the deadline. When you see what Canada is asking for, why each condition was designed to be both completely fair and very hard to say no to, what the $935 billion plan contains part by part, and why Trump will almost certainly not agree, even though agreeing is the smart choice by every measure, you will understand why these might be the most important 48 hours in the history of American trade. Subscribe now. The clock is ticking. Let me show you what Canada is demanding, because the conditions are the part of the story that shows exactly how smart Ottawa's plan has become. These are not wild demands. They are not meant to embarrass anyone. They are designed to be perfectly, precisely, and carefully reasonable, so that saying no becomes impossible to defend in front of anyone watching. Condition 1, stop all tariffs between the two countries right away. Every tariff placed on Canadian goods since the trade war started. Steel, aluminum, lumber, dairy, manufactured goods, every single one stopped within 48 hours. Not slowly ended over months. Not cut down little by little. Not sent to a group to study. Stopped immediately. Canada is not asking for a negotiation. Canada is demanding a ceasefire, and a ceasefire is the most reasonable thing a country can ask for after 8 months of economic warfare. The tariffs have cost American shoppers about $47 billion per year. They have failed to reach any goal they were supposed to reach. They have raised prices on American-made products that use Canadian materials. They have broken up supply chains that were built to work together smoothly. Stopping them would give American businesses instant relief, lower prices for shoppers, and steady the North American manufacturing systems that millions of American jobs depend on. Condition 1 is designed so that following through helps the United States. Stopping tariffs that hurt American shoppers more than Canadian sellers is not giving something up. It is common sense, and that is what makes the demand so powerful. Refusing means choosing to keep hurting your own people just to avoid admitting that tariffs were a mistake. Condition 2, publicly take back the 5 demands. The rule about independence, the ban on currency, the snapback tariff power, the requirement to match American foreign policy, and the intelligence conditions. All 5 must be formally and publicly taken back in a signed statement from the White House. Not quietly set aside, not saved for a future conversation, not quietly forgotten, but publicly withdrawn. The 5 demands were rejected by the Canadian Parliament with every single vote. Every party, every member. They were rejected by the Canadian public with over 80% support. They destroyed 2 trade deals worth a combined $1.65 trillion. They have been called colonial, delusional, and illegitimate by every allied government that looked at them. Canada is demanding that Washington formally admit what the whole world already knows. The demands were wrong from the start. They caused the crisis, and they need to be officially and publicly dropped. This is the condition where the warning becomes personal, because publicly taking back the 5 demands means publicly admitting that the strategy failed. And for a leader who has built his presidency on the idea that he never loses and never admits he is wrong, that admission may be the most impossible demand of all, not because it is unfair, but because it goes against the very way this particular decision maker thinks. Condition 3, agree to restart talks with no requirements attached. The United States agrees to come back to the table with nothing that must be settled first. No independence clause as a requirement before talks. No demands that have to be met before talks can begin. Both sides' professional trade negotiators given the power to build a new system based on mutual respect, fair market pricing, and equal standing. This is not surrender. This is the exit ramp. Canada is offering Washington a way back to the table, but only if Washington admits that the table is between equals, not between a powerful country giving orders and a neighbor forced to accept them. Professional trade negotiators on both sides would welcome this condition. They have been trying to build a workable system from the beginning. They have done it twice, the $730 billion deal and the $917 billion deal, and both were destroyed by political leaders. What they need, what they have always needed, is permission to succeed. The three conditions are put together with the careful precision of a chess endgame. Each one is designed to be acceptable. Stopping tariffs helps American shoppers. Taking back failed demands accepts reality. Talks with no conditions give a path to a solution, but each one is also designed to be very hard to refuse. Continuing tariffs that hurt Americans. Defending demands the world has rejected. Refusing to talk when the other side is offering to sit down. Canada designed this ultimatum like a fork in the road, where every path Washington takes reveals something about American leadership. Agreeing shows wisdom. Refusing shows ego, and the world is watching to see which one it gets. So those are the conditions. Now let me show you what happens if the 48 hours run out without an agreement, because what Canada has put together behind this warning is not a bluff. The $935 billion plan that starts when the clock hits zero has 5 parts. Each one is devastating on its own. Together, they are the most complete economic response ever built by a mid-sized country against a superpower. Part 1. A blanket increase in tariffs. About $120 billion in yearly impact. Every American product entering Canada gets hit with payback tariffs. Not targeted anymore, but across the board. Everything America sends to Canada faces payback charges designed to hit swing state economies as hard as possible. Bourbon from Kentucky, the state's main export worth billions, targeted directly at the Senate Minority Leader's voters. Soybeans from Iowa and corn from the Midwest, hitting the farm states that form the political base of the administration. Dairy from Wisconsin, energy equipment from Texas and Ohio, everyday goods from Florida, farm machinery from the Great Plains. The sharp targeted strikes Canada used in its earlier retaliation, carefully aimed at politically weak parts of Congress, grow into a full sweep. Every American seller that sends products to Canada faces payback charges. Every part of Congress that depends on the Canadian market feels the hit on their next earnings report. Part 2. Energy export changes. About $200 billion in impact. This is the part with the most immediate human consequences. The electricity charge already hitting the northeastern United States, the one already raising bills for millions of families in New York and Boston, doubles from the current 25 to 30% all the way, up to 50 to 60%. Every family that was already paying $30 to $60 more per month now faces a second increase that pushes bills $80 to $150 above what they were before the trade war. The grandmother in the Bronx who was already struggling with $60 more per month now faces $150 more. At the same time, 2 million of the 4 million barrels of Canadian oil flowing each day to American oil processing plants get redirected to buyers in the Atlantic and Pacific within 18 months through systems that were built specifically because Washington threatened Canada's energy supply. Natural gas exports would be shifted to favor European and Asian buyers, who offered partnership instead of threats. If the deadline passes, the energy relationship goes through a permanent change, not just a short-term price bump, but a real, system-backed shift of Canadian energy exports away from the United States and toward markets that valued the relationship while Washington was destroying it. American oil processing plants built specifically to handle Canadian heavy crude face supply problems that no executive order can fix, because the crude is physically flowing through different pipelines to different terminals, serving different customers. The crude goes east, the refineries go idle, and the jobs that depend on those refineries go with them. Part 3. A ban on critical minerals. About $85 billion in impact. All mineral exports to the United States stop completely. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, rare earths, every critical mineral that flows from Canadian mines to American manufacturers stops at the border. The existing 25-year contracts Canada signed with Germany, Japan, and Korea during the trade war absorbed the redirected supply. These contracts were signed exactly so that Canada would have somewhere to send its minerals if the American market became unavailable. The 6.8 billion ton aluminum reserve gets developed only with non-American partners, under agreements that lock American companies out for the life of the deposit. American electric vehicle battery makers lose their lithium and cobalt supply overnight. American defense companies lose their aluminum and rare earth supply. American computer chip makers lose critical mineral inputs that have no alternative source available at comparable size, quality, or cost within any realistic time frame. The minerals that would have flowed south under the $917 billion deal's $85 billion mineral agreement, the one killed over the Independence Clause, now flow to every major economy on Earth except the one that destroyed the deal. Part 4. Separating financial systems. About $180 billion in impact. Euro road payment systems are sped up to full working capacity. Canadian pension funds and government investment funds are directed to sell American holdings on a fast timeline. Banking cooperation between Canadian and American financial institutions is suspended. Cross-border financial services are withdrawn. $180 billion in Canadian investment money exits American markets, concentrated into weeks rather than years. Pension funds that hold U.S. bonds sell them. Banks that handle cross-border deals stop. The financial system that connected the two economies breaks apart in a controlled, deliberate sequence. Part 5. Ally activation. About $350 billion in impact. This is the part that should worry Washington the most, because it is not just between two countries. It involves many countries. The Germany-Canada connection becomes an exclusive partnership, with American companies completely locked out of Canadian resource access. The Commonwealth sets up lower tariff rates for 56 nations, specifically leaving out the United States. CPTP members work together on joint trade positions that go around American unreliability. EU solidarity measures turn on. NATO purchasing shifts through Canadian supply chains. America's own allies, Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, Australia, the European Union, joining together in organized economic pressure against the United States in support of Canada. The network of allies that Canada spent 8 months building was designed for exactly this moment, $935 billion. 5 parts: tariffs, energy, minerals, finance, and alliances. Each one devastating on its own. Together, they are the most complete economic counterstrike ever assembled by a non-superpower against a superpower. And the number itself carries a message. $935 billion is larger than the $917 billion deal that Trump killed. Canada has built more power than the deal was worth. The threat is now bigger than the solution would have been. And that is when Warren Buffett weighed in on whether this warning is real. There are 2 kinds of ultimatums in the world, Buffett said. Theatrical ultimatums, where the threat is not believable, the deadline is flexible, and everyone knows the country making the threat cannot follow through, and real ultimatums, where the threat is assembled, the deadline is firm, and the country making it has both the ability and the will to carry it out. Canada's ultimatum is the second kind, and I will tell you how I know. Every part of the $935 billion plan exists on its own and is ready to go. The payback tariffs are written and ready. The energy systems for the redirect are in place. The mineral contracts with allied countries are signed. The financial bypass systems are built. The ally coordination is active and has been practiced. Canada does not need to build the weapon. The weapon is already built. The 48 hours is just the safety being removed. When I look at an ultimatum, and I have been on both sides of negotiations for 70 years, I ask 3 questions. Does the country making the threat have the ability to carry it out? Yes. Canada has put together every part. Does the country making the threat have the will to carry it out? Given everything Washington has done to Canada over the past 8 months, the will is absolute. Does the country making the threat have other options if the ultimatum fails? Canada has more working trade options than any country in this conflict. The Germany connection, the Commonwealth, CPTP, CCTA. The answer to all 3 questions is yes. This ultimatum is real. On whether Trump will agree, I have positioned Berkshire's portfolio on the assumption that he will not because the conditions are unreasonable. They are the most reasonable conditions that could possibly be offered under the circumstances. Stopping tariffs helps American shoppers. Taking back failed demands admits what the whole world already knows. Talks with no conditions give the path to a solution that both sides' professional trade teams have been desperate for. He will not agree because agreeing requires something this particular decision-maker cannot provide: a public admission that the strategy failed. It requires taking back demands that he personally pushed for. It requires admitting on the world stage that Canada outmaneuvered the United States. And for a leader who has built his entire presidency on the idea that he never loses, a public admission of failure costs more in his mind than the $935 billion consequence. That is the tragedy of this ultimatum. The conditions save America money, they restore American credibility, they give a path to a solution, and they will almost certainly be refused. because the cost to his ego is more than this particular decision-maker can accept. The rational choice is to agree. The expected choice is to refuse. And the gap between those two, between what makes sense and what ego allows, is the gap that will cost the American economy $935 billion. On what happens after, if the deadline passes and the plan turns on, and I believe it will, the consequences are not ideas, they are real. The energy redirect starts immediately and becomes impossible to undo within months as pipelines get contracted and terminals get committed. The mineral ban hits American manufacturing within weeks. The financial separation creates selling pressure that grows over time, and the ally activation, America's own allies working together against it economically, creates a reality in global politics that makes every previous embarrassment in this trade war look like a small thing. Berkshire has already prepared for non-compliance. Canadian assets, allied nation exposure, commodity positions, energy investments, all set up for the situation where the clock runs out without agreement. I do not gamble, Buffett said. I analyze, and the analysis says Washington will not meet this deadline. The money has already voted, the big investors have already moved their positions. The only people who do not yet understand what is about to happen are the people inside the White House. Now let me explain why Canada can issue a warning of this size. Because 8 months ago, this would have been impossible. The power did not exist in working form. The systems were not built. The alliances were not made official. The underground resource finds had not been confirmed. The financial bypass systems were not constructed. Canada's ability to issue a believable $935 billion ultimatum to the United States of America is not an accident. It is the direct result of 8 months of American strategic failure. 8 months during which every American move that was supposed to push Canada into giving in instead gave Canada the motivation, the justification, and the international support to build the most complete economic counter-strike plan in the history of mid-size country diplomacy. Consider what Canada has built up. Energy power, 4 million barrels per day of crude oil that American refineries depend on, plus electricity exports that the northeastern power grid cannot work without, plus Atlantic diversification systems built specifically to reduce Canada's dependence on the American market. Mineral power, the 6.8 billion ton aluminum find, plus existing critical mineral supplies, plus 25-year contracts with allied countries that guarantee other markets. Alliance power, the $180 billion Germany-Canada connection, the Commonwealth network of 56 nations, CPTP market access across the Asia-Pacific, CEDA integration with the European Union, and the UK special relationship. Financial power, Euro road payment systems that go around the $180 billion in Canadian investment money currently in American markets that can be pulled out, and banking cooperation that can be stopped. Credibility power, Carney's personal standing as the most trusted economic leader in the democratic world, and Canada's reputation as a reliable partner, in contrast with American unreliability. 8 months ago, Canada had none of this in working form. 8 months of American pressure built every single part. The tariffs pushed Canada to spread out its trade relationships, and Canada did it with a speed and strategic focus that caught Washington completely off guard, building partnerships with Germany, Japan, Korea, the EU, and the Commonwealth that now form the backbone of the ally activation part. The energy threats pushed Canada to build Atlantic systems, and the LNG terminals, the hydrogen connection, the pipeline redirects, and the energy deals with European and Asian buyers were built specifically because Washington threatened Canada's energy income. The mineral demands pushed Canada to sign 25-year market rate deals with allied countries, deals that now serve as the system that makes the mineral ban part possible without leaving Canadian miners, without customers. The 5 demands created worldwide sympathy and allied support that makes organizing together against the United States not just possible, but actively supported by America's own allies. The deal destructions, $730 billion killed by poison pills and $917 billion killed over the independence cause, pushed financial independence, and the Euro road payment systems and investment pullout tools that make up the financial separation part were built as a direct response to the proven unreliability of the dollar-based two-country financial relationship. Every part of the $935 billion plan was created by Washington's own actions. The tariffs built the payback capacity. The energy threats built the diversification systems. The mineral demands built the alternative partnerships. The deal destructions built the financial bypass systems. And the trade war itself, the sustained 8-month campaign of economic pressure against a democratic ally, built the worldwide sympathy that makes allied coordination against the United States not just possible, but politically popular. Washington did not just lose the trade war. Washington armed Canada. Every threat was a brick in the wall now being used against the country that supplied the bricks. Every tariff was a tool that Canada learned to use. Every destroyed deal was motivation that Canada turned into construction. And the $935 billion plan that now stands behind a 48-hour deadline is the complete, assembled, working product of American strategic failure. Carney chose 48 hours for a reason, and the timeline itself shows the strategic intelligence that has defined Canada's approach throughout this entire conflict. Not a week, not 30 days, not an open-ended deadline. 48 hours. Because Carney understands how Washington works better than Washington understands itself. Given a week, they would stall, form a task group between agencies, order a legal review, hold press conferences about the press conferences they will hold tomorrow. Given 30 days, they would posture and counter-threaten and leak to friendly media and run out the clock through the kind of slow, bureaucratic delay that Washington has perfected over decades. Given 48 hours, they have to decide. There is no time for committees, no time for studies, no time for communication planning. Just a decision: agree or face $935 billion in consequences. The choice Canada has forced is the choice the 48 hours forces. A yes or no choice with no room for delay, no space for posturing, and no escape into process. The timeline itself is a show of complete confidence. You only issue 48-hour deadlines when you are sure of your power, sure of your ability, and ready to act without hesitation the moment the clock hits zero. Now, here's the cruelest part of this analysis, and it is the part that should stay with every American who understands what is at stake. The logical case for agreeing is overwhelming, and it almost certainly does not matter. Stopping the tariff saves American shoppers $47 billion per year. That is $130 million every single day that American families and businesses are currently paying in higher prices because of tariffs that have failed to achieve any stated goal. Stopping them would immediately lower the cost of American-made cars that use Canadian parts, lower grocery prices for food that crosses the border, lower construction costs for buildings that use Canadian lumber and steel, and steady the supply chains that millions of American manufacturing jobs depend on. It would be the single biggest relief measure for shoppers available to the administration. Bigger than any tax cut, any stimulus, any program that gives money away, and it would cost the government nothing. Taking back the 5 demands admits what every allied government, every international organization, every independent trade expert, and every professional negotiator on both sides has already decided: that the demands were not legitimate, that they caused the crisis, and that they destroyed $1.65 trillion in negotiated trade deals. It admits reality. Talks with no conditions give the path to a new 2-country deal that both sides' professional trade teams have been desperately trying to build from the beginning. 2 deals built, 2 deals destroyed. And the negotiators still willing to try a third if they are given permission. Agreeing would end the trade war in terms that help American workers, American businesses, and American shoppers. Allied governments would welcome it as the first sign of American rational thinking in 8 months. Markets would surge as investors move from expecting permanent conflict back to expecting a solution. American credibility would slowly, painfully begin to recover. The logical case is not just strong. It is agreed upon by every serious economic voice that has studied this conflict. But the ego barrier stands between rational thinking and action, like a wall that no amount of economic logic can break through. Publicly taking back the 5 demands means publicly admitting that the central strategy of the trade war was wrong from the beginning. It means standing in front of cameras and saying these demands were a mistake. The independence clause was colonial. The currency ban was overreach. The entire approach was misconceived. For a decision-maker who has never publicly admitted being wrong about anything, who has in fact built an entire political identity on the idea that he never makes mistakes and never loses, that admission is not a policy change. It is an identity crisis. Agreeing with the Canadian deadline means publicly admitting on the world stage that Canada won, that the country Washington tried to bully into giving in is now the one setting the terms, that the balance of power has flipped so completely that the President of the United States is responding to a 48-hour clock set by Ottawa. Returning to the table with no conditions means giving up the dominance thinking that defined the entire trade war approach from its very first day, the insistence that America sets the terms and others accept them. This president killed a $730 billion deal rather than remove the independence clause. He killed a $917 billion deal rather than accept a system that did not include it. He has shown twice, at a combined cost of $1.65 trillion in destroyed deals, $47 billion per year in ongoing tariff costs, and damage to American credibility in alliances that cannot be measured, that he will destroy any outcome that does not include control over Canadian independence. The pattern is clear. The pattern is consistent across 2 years of escalation, and the pattern predicts with devastating likelihood that the clock will run out without agreement. The conditions make economic sense but are mentally impossible for this specific decision maker. Meeting them saves America money, restores American credibility, and gives a path to a solution. But meeting them costs a president who cannot afford to lose the one thing he values above all else, the image of winning. In a rational political system, a leader who saved Americans $47 billion per year by ending a failed trade war would be celebrated as someone who put his country's interests above his own ego. In this political system, in this political moment, a leader who agreed with the Canadian ultimatum would be torn apart by his own base before the ink was even dry. The political incentives are completely out of line with economic rational thinking. And the tragedy is not that the decision is hard. The right answer is obvious to everyone who looks at it. The tragedy is that the right answer is politically impossible for the one person who has to give it. So the clock hits zero. The conditions are not met. And the $935 billion plan turns on. All 5 parts fire at the same time. Not one after another. Not in rising stages that give Washington time to negotiate its way out at each step, but all at once. The entire $935 billion in assembled economic countermeasures deploys at once. Blanket payback tariffs on every American product entering Canada. Energy export changes beginning with pipeline contracts and terminal agreements signed within the first week. Mineral ban cutting off American manufacturers from lithium, cobalt, aluminum, and rare earths, effective immediately. Financial separation pulling $180 billion in Canadian investment money from American markets on a fast timeline. Ally activation. Organizing America's own allies into multi-country systems that specifically leave the United States out of Canadian resource access and trade advantages. And once the plan turns on, the parts do not turn off on request. They cannot be reversed by a midnight phone call, a social media post, or a quickly arranged summit. The energy redirect creates system commitments, pipeline contracts, terminal agreements, long-term supply deals that have legal force and terms lasting decades. The mineral ban triggers alternative supply contracts with Germany, Japan, and Korea that lock in access for 25 years. The financial separation reorganizes investment flows through payment systems and custody arrangements that take years to rebuild. The ally coordination creates multi-country trade systems with their own built-in momentum and their own member nations' domestic political supporters. Turning it on is a one-way door. Canada designed it that way deliberately, so that the 48-hour deadline is the last moment when things can still be turned around. After that moment passes, the structure of the global economy reorganizes permanently around the absence of American participation. The 48 hours is not just a deadline, it is the point of no return. So here is where the clock stands. Canada issued a 48-hour ultimatum with 3 conditions. Stop tariffs that hurt your own people. Take back demands the world has rejected. Sit down at a table between equals. Behind those conditions stands $935 billion in assembled consequences: tariffs, energy, minerals, finance, and organized allied pressure. Every part is working. Every system is built. Every alliance is active. Buffett says the ultimatum is real and has moved billions on the expectation of non-compliance. The logical answer to every condition is yes. The expected answer from this decision maker is no. 8 months ago, Washington gave Canada a list of 5 demands and told it to agree or face consequences. The demands were backed by the economic power of the United States, the world's largest economy, the country that issues the world's main currency, the center of global finance. Canada was expected to give in, because that is what countries do when the United States makes demands. That is what history predicted. That is what the administration assumed. Today, Canada gave Washington a list of 3 conditions and told it to agree or face $935 billion in consequences. The conditions are backed by assembled power that covers 5 areas of economic strength: tariffs, energy, minerals, finance, and organized allied pressure built during the very trade war that was supposed to break Canadian resistance. 8 months ago, the world expected Canada to give in. Today, the world is watching to see if Washington does. That is the arc of this trade war, from American demands to Canadian ultimatums, from do what we say to do what makes sense or face the consequences, from a superpower telling a neighbor to submit to a neighbor telling a superpower to choose. The power flip that began with a rejected demand and continued through walked-out deals, spread-out partnerships, underground discoveries, weaponized electricity, and global alliances is now complete. Canada is the one setting deadlines. Washington is the one watching the clock. Watch the clock. Watch the White House response. Watch the markets at hour 47. Because at hour 49, either the trade war is over or it enters a stage that makes everything that came before look like a warm-up. 48 hours. 3 conditions. $935 billion in consequences. Canada designed this ultimatum to be the easiest yes in the history of international trade. Stop tariffs that hurt your own people. Take back demands the world has rejected. Sit down at a table between equals. The rational answer is yes. The economic answer is yes. The answer that helps the American people is yes. And the most likely answer from a leader who has killed $1.65 trillion in deals, rather than accept anything less than total dominance, is no. The clock is ticking. And the distance between rational thinking and ego is about to be measured in hundreds of billions of dollars.